Story 1. Intruder at Night. This occurred roughly 3 years ago. I was on vacation visiting my brother and I was lodging in a rented house. I don't get to see him very often because he lives 6 hours away, and when I do I have to stay somewhere else because his apartment is only 1 bedroom. My brother's flat was very near to the house I rented out. The house was an easy decision to make because it was the same price as surrounding hotels. I arrived in town early, had lunch with my brother, went grocery shopping, and returned to the rental by 5 o'clock. Beyond a couch, TV, and bed, the place didn't have much to offer, but I wasn't expecting too much for the price. After 9 o'clock, I went to bed. I was eager to get a decent night's sleep because it had been a hard day. I stayed up in bed longer than I intended to, and an hour later, I went to sleep. My eyes opened, and I could see that it was the middle of the night despite the complete blackness of the room. But before I could even look at the clock, I heard movement outside the room, footsteps moving slowly down the hallway, a gentle door closing, and then silence. I lay in bed motionless, peering into the dark room as if my entire body had frozen. When a minute went by and there were no more noises, I stood up and peered out into the hallway. I knew it was the front door since I'd heard them close it, but I couldn't tell if they had left or stayed in the house at the far end. I silently made my way through the other rooms, noticing no one. Actually, the fact that the front door was unlocked was the only indication they had been here. Neither footprints nor missing objects were visible to me. I dialed 911 after making sure all the doors' locks were secure. They arrived really quickly but made little progress. Aside from their ineffective advice, they stated to make sure all the doors were closed and to get in touch with the owner, but they showed little desire to solve the problem. Unable to sleep that night, I stayed up till morning. I spoke with the rental property owner over the phone, and then I went to see my brother. I felt much better when the owner informed me that he had changed the door's PIN code while I was gone. That day, however, I stayed out till late, meeting up with my brother for supper and drinks before being dropped off at the rental sometime between 8 and 9. I walked over to the couch and took a seat, feeling both drowsy and anxious about the whole thing. Again, fear of the invader returning would fill my brain each time my eyes were about to close. I made the decision to go through the house again and check the rooms in the hopes of calming my nerves because I knew I needed to sleep tonight, because I didn't get any last night. I made my way into the kitchen and living area before heading into the bedroom via the hallway. As I was checking the connected bathroom and opening the closet, I heard footsteps coming from the bedroom I was in down the corridor. As I turned the corner, all I could see of the big man was slamming the bedroom door shut. Then, as I stood there listening, I heard his footsteps leave and head toward the living room. Before I heard the front door open and close behind him, he made his way around the kitchen and living area, remaining inside the house for perhaps 2 minutes. When I called again, the police arrived promptly, and the homeowner showed up as well. The living room and kitchen appeared to have been looted. The furniture was strewn about, and the cabinets were all ajar, with contents thrown all over the place. However, upon careful inspection, the owner found nothing missing. Whoever that man was, it appeared more like he was searching for a single, highly particular item. After checking into a hotel and leaving the rental, I was never contacted again regarding anything for a few days. I'm assuming he was never located. However, I have a lot of questions about this issue. The question of where he was hiding bothers me a lot. I had looked through the entire house that evening. How much time had he spent with me in the house? Was he observing me? Furthermore, what would have occurred if I had dozed off on the sofa? Story 2. Visitor at Night. At 32, I live alone in a rural home. I don't usually talk to people and only travel into town when absolutely necessary, but I do have a few neighbors who live about half a mile away. I work as a contractor for a few months out of the year, but I spend the majority of my time at home because I am half retired. It was late fall at the time, and I was cleaning out all of my equipment from outside in the yard and putting it inside the shed in preparation for the winter. It was basically a collection of tools, lawnmowers, and other items that I had forgotten to include. Nevertheless, I noticed something strange when I was outside. A man was strolling down the street that led to my driveway. He carried no backpack or camping equipment. To put things in perspective, the town was 4 hours' walk away, and the road he was on was completely deserted, save for a few houses similar to mine. I kept an eye on him till he vanished down the far road. I looked down after he was gone, and there were no cars on the side of the road in either direction. Although it was somewhat strange, I eventually stopped thinking about it and completed my yard. I fixed dinner as I cooled it off after returning inside before nightfall. I was startled out of my seat at the table by an unexpected crash coming from outside. There was a thump that sounded like it had come from the shed. It was wooden. The shed door was ajar when I peered out the window to observe the yard. The door had never unlatched likeway on its own, even though it was old. Even though I wasn't really sure what was going on, I knew I needed to at least check on it and shut the door. Though I was sure nothing untoward would happen, I brought my rifle just in case. I listened intently as I walked outside to the shed, but all I could hear was the stillness of the night. I also scanned the field, but I didn't see any indications of humans or wildlife. I switched on my flashlight and shone it inside the shed when I arrived. Nothing appeared out of place. When I intervened, I looked more carefully for any animals that might be lurking, but nothing turned up. After making sure the shed door was shut securely, I began my return. An unsettling feeling began to grow inside of me as I made my way across the field toward my house. It kept growing as I got closer to the front door, but I had no idea what it was. After entering, I shut the door behind me. I noticed a shoe print directly on the floor as soon as I entered the hallway. Turning on the light, and a row of soiled shoe tracks that led to the spare bedroom was located across the hall. I raised my rifle up, took a deep breath, and cautiously approached the door as my heart began to race. I listened with my head pressed against the wood, perceiving what seemed to be human breathing on the other side. The door flung open and the handle twisted out of my hand before I had a chance to consider my next move. A man appeared to be ready to lunge at me as I sprang back and raised the gun, holding up a massive metal shovel. Still, I believe my gun stopped him cold. With a look of anger on his face, he stood at the doorway, the shovel in his hand like a weapon. Trying to seem scary, I yelled as loudly as I could for him to back off, but I was definitely scared. The man remained at a distance, but his angry expression never went away. But from this point on, I was at a loss for what to do. If I contacted the police, they probably wouldn't be able to get here for an hour, and I most definitely didn't want to jeopardize anything by holding him at gunpoint for that long. The man abruptly flung the shovel at me and ran back into the room as we stood in an odd quiet. I observed him begin to crawl out of the window as I rushed in to check what he was doing. A part of me wanted to stop him, but I was unable to force myself to stop him. He leaped out and fled into the field, disappearing into the vast, empty night without a method to track his whereabouts. That man's identity has never been revealed, and we don't know what his objectives were. All I can say is that I probably wouldn't be here today if I hadn't had my rifle in my hands, or if he had gotten the better of me. Story 3. A surprise visit. At the time, I was 18, and the summer was just getting started, so I had no work and no schooling. I spent much of my time relaxing, watching TV or YouTube, or playing video games inside the house. My parents left the house with me while they were out of town for a few days during the time of this. I would occasionally invite people over or do something else, but this particular evening I was just enjoying some alone time. This was a regular occurrence and never a huge deal. I was browsing through my phone and watching a rerun of one of my favorite series on Netflix. There was a knock at the front door. I'm not sure exactly when it was, but it was probably around 11 or 12. I turned the TV off and went to investigate. The fact that it was so late nearly escaped my notice, but happily it did before I foolishly opened the door. Through the peephole I could see 2 men who were waiting for me to respond. They were dressed similarly. I paused to consider whether or not to ask them what they wanted to let them know I was back home. I eventually simply watched and remained silent, waiting for them to go. However, a short while later, they yelled, "Hello, we're here looking to speak with Mr. and Mrs. Ian." They were talking about my parents, albeit I altered their name out of respect for their privacy, even though I knew it was too late for a visit of any kind, even if it was significant. I stayed silent, confused. The men exchanged a quick glance, whispered something quietly, and then left the porch. I was unable to see where they went because the outside lights were off, but I never saw any headlights or cars, which made me question if they had actually walked here, which would only make things more bizarre. I returned to the TV and put it on pause so I could hear if they returned. It was just a matter of minutes before I heard footsteps outside the home. They approached the porch, but instead of knocking as they had previously, they began to move toward the side of the house. As soon as they reached the backyard, I got up and raced to the back window. I heard them approach the back door, start talking, and then start fiddling with the door while I watched them unlock the fence and go inside. I tried to hide out of sight by hiding behind the window. I used this as an opportunity to grab my phone and duck into the garage. After reporting the potential break-in to the police, the back door slipped open and a loud pop sound reverberated through the house in less than a minute. They followed their tracks all the way through the house to the stairs that led up to the bedrooms. They heard a door open, went inside, and shut it behind them, but then nothing more could be heard. Before the cops arrived at the residence, I had to wait in quiet for a terrifying and slow 10 minutes. As they arrived, there were a few hurried footsteps upstairs, followed by an argument between the two men. A couple of the officers entered through the rear door and made their way upstairs, and another officer went to the garage to assist me outside. The men said nothing about their motivations for being there, but they also did not oppose the others. They could only charge them with breaking and entering, even though weeks passed, and it was becoming increasingly clear that they weren't just robbing the residence. The fact that they appeared to be searching for my parents, though, worries me since it gave me the impression that they would wait upstairs for them until they returned from their vacation. Something about their actions makes me believe that they still would have broken in and done whatever needed to be done to me, even if I debated whether or not I should have showed myself and whether or not it would have stopped the break-in.